Hey everyone, welcome to chapter 2. So, if you've made it here, then you have stayed in the class. All right, this chapter we're going to be talking about ethics and multicultural competence, stress and trauma, building resilience. All right, so the awareness and knowledge for this chapter: develop an understanding of the basics of ethical counseling and therapy practice. You are going to learn a lot about ethics in this class and the differences between ethical guidelines and laws. So you may have heard sometimes that some therapists, you may have seen it on the news, TV, social media, whatever, when sometimes therapists have crossed those ethical guidelines and boundaries. They may not have broken a law, but they've broken ethical guidelines. So I definitely talk about that a lot in this course. All right, examine your identity as a multicultural being, how dimensions of diversity and privilege may affect the session, and the central importance of multicultural competence. Become aware of the soul wound, trauma, and intergenerational trauma. You're going to have an exercise to do where it addresses that. And then understand how neuroscience can guide our practice. If you remember from chapter 1, I said neuroscience, neurobiology, all of that, all of those, elements of the brain are going to play in every single chapter. All right, with skills in action, ability to use the respectful model for encountering multicultural difference. You're like, wait, what's that? It's an acronym for something. So again, like I said in chapter 1, you're going to learn a lot of words and things and concepts, but are you going to actually say that in your practice? Like, I am using this model. No, you're not. These are just things that you just know in your brain. All right, ability to counsel beginning clients who experience microaggressions, ability to apply positive psychology and wellness as a basis for fostering and building client resilience. There's that word again. Ability to employ therapeutic lifestyle changes, also known as TLCs, as positive wellness strategies in the session for physical and mental health. All right, when we look at ethics, ethics are thoughtful, professional lists of do's and don'ts for our profession. Again, they're not exactly rules, right? Like you think of rules and regulations, these are lists of the things you do, the things you don't do. Um, Ethical codes can be summarized as do no harm to your clients. That is something that you constantly hear as a clinician, psychologist, therapist, whatever, is our job is to do no harm. Um, Treat them responsibly with full awareness of the social responsibility of helping. Morals are individual principles by which we live that define our beliefs about right and wrong. All right, the anticipated client response to professional ethics is this. So if you are engaging in professional responsibility and being ethically sound, what that is going to entail is greater trust. So your client is going to trust you more. Acknowledgement that personal actions count, that you have integrity. Examination of their own moral and ethical decisions. So when you work with a client and maybe their actions are a little bit dicey, right? You're going to help them, right? That's the job, is to assist in them examining their own morality. All right, maintain confidentiality. Before in chapter 1, we talked about, when we ended it, we talked about where therapy sessions take place, right? So being confidential encompasses a lot. If it's in your office, right, you do that by having, let's say you have an office with a waiting room, right? You have a sound machine. This way, if someone comes in, they don't hear the session. Your notes, right? They're either, if they're online, they're encrypted, or if you handwrite your notes, those are locked in a file cabinet. There's a lot of things that you'll learn along the way when it comes to ethical guidelines and laws and all that kind of stuff. Um, and there's times when confidentiality needs to be broken, right? That's hopefully few and far between. And then there are the confidentiality issues that you discuss with your clients if you meet them out in public and if people overhear. You always need to protect yourself by having them sign the informed consent that these things could happen. So it's really important. And of course, this is just basic counseling skills. As you move further in your academia, it's going to be more, sound. You're going to get so much of this. When you're done with all this, it's going to be like the back of your hand. You're going to know it. Recognize your limitations. Know what you can do. Know what your limitations are ethically, and know where you might need help, mentorship, work, whatever. Remain in consultation with your professor, workshop leader, mentor, like I said before. Be aware of individual and cultural differences. It's okay to be different. Our job is a helper. We are here to guide our clients, help them in their, whatever their quest is. We don't need to be perfect. We don't need to know everything. We just need to be a sounding board, an empathetic ear, and be able to offer them professional guidance. Remember the golden and platinum rules. Give special attention to the ethical treatment of children and their rights. If you're going to be working with children, that's completely different. And you'll be taking classes on that if you do that. All right. Counseling and therapy are global phenomena. Multicultural competence is imperative. Again, we're going to hear that word a lot. Pay attention to cultural differences. So, for example, women, BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQIA plus people, everyone, everybody is different. We are all different color puzzle pieces in this world. Awareness of clients' multicultural backgrounds enables us to understand their uniqueness more fully, and even our own. Without awareness, we fail to establish good client relationships. Our field is a global force in psychological liberation. All right, again, here we have that Venn diagram. We look at individual, relational, family, community, contextual, society, period in world history, and then global. So again, we're looking at these things individually and separately. All right, respectful interviewing and counseling enable us to discover the multiple voices our clients bring to us. They're going to come to us from different perspectives, their own, their version of what other people have told them, family, friends, significant others, co-workers, people like that. So it's our job to help them see their voice. The model enables us to identify the past and present voices that affect our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Identify what is meaningful in the way you think about yourself. Look at the list as a source of information about your own and your client's resilience. Watch for the possibility of cultural and historical trauma in each of the respectful dimensions. Okay, so now to that model. All right, respectful, religion / spirituality, economic, class background, sexual identity, personal style and education, ethnic, racial identity, chronological lifespan status, trauma, crisis, family background, history, unique physical characteristics, location of residual language models. I'm so glad you can't see my hands a lot because I move them a lot. I'm a hand, like I talk with my hands a lot. All right, here is just a snapshot for you to look at. Take in, looks like a big old Rubik's Cube. I'm not going to go over this, but it's just in visual context. All right, individualism and or community. Individualism and community are often treated as opposites, but they work together. We are members of multiple communities, many of which influenced our life paths. Some may even become our main identities today. Your path that was before may not be now, may not be your future. What are your important communities, past and present? How have they affected your identity? That we need to know as clinicians. Our fields have paid little attention to our communities and their meaning to us. Without considering their community and culture, environmental and contextual influences, you only know part of the person. That's why in therapy, counseling, it's very important to understand the holistic view. All right, intergenerational transmission of trauma. The trauma of severe abusive treatment can persist over generations. So even if you didn't experience it, dogs barking. More barking dogs. All right, I had a package being delivered. Okay, anyways, let's move on to privilege. Privilege is power given to people through cultural assumptions and stereotypes. Being in some respectful categories offers immediate privilege. Income inequality is now recognized as a central multicultural issue. An active teaching, consulting, coaching role is needed on the part of the counselor. All right, I need my glasses. All right, oh, much better. All right, we need to avoid stereotyping one group's cultural identity. That's very important to note as a therapist, because sometimes you are in this role and you're talking to your client, and your own worldviews can kind of sink in when you're talking to someone. So it is very important to avoid that. And again, you're going to learn a lot, in your courses of counseling on how to engage with people. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to believe how they believe or any of that. It just means you will learn how to use restraint in a positive way. So it's just important. And then increasing awareness of societal privilege is needed. All right, stress and trauma. Stress is ubiquitous in our life experiences. It is a major and defining issue in counseling and therapy. Mental and physical health are declining due to inability to cope in healthy ways with stressors experienced, especially since COVID-19. As we have seen, anxiety and depression have gone through the roof since COVID. We are now starting to get to a, more normalized state, but, stress is one of the biggest things that bring people in counseling. So it is very important that we are that agent of change for our clients. The current level of stress is higher than level reported in 2020. And a lot of that is, when something happens, right? Like COVID-19, it's already like it's new and we don't know what's going on. But then after the dust kind of settles, then it's like, whoa, what am I left with? So that's the reason that it says the current level of stress is higher than level reported. Of course, now this text was written or published in 2023. So it just goes to show you that we're not talking in these last 2 years, we're talking from COVID-19 up until, that point. So, consequences during the pandemic: feelings of anxiety, sadness, and anger, gaining weight, sleeping less, drinking more alcohol, additionally, feeling overwhelmed and delaying or canceling healthcare services. That was huge, especially for cancer patients. When the pandemic first happened and it was like, what is going on? A lot of people, especially those first 2 weeks, people were like, oh, this is some people, all right, we're like, oh, this is kind of cool, got some time off, whatever. Then when it started really setting in what it really entailed, that's when we saw, anxiety levels increasing. And after it was all said and done, 2 years into it, that's when we really saw the levels of anxiety, depression, suicide really skyrocket. And we also saw that there was a lack of mental health support. So, we're just starting to become, I don't even want to use the word normalized, but it's starting to just now try to level out. But nothing is ever perfectly balanced, right? There's always like a teeter totter of things. So it's just important to know, when pandemics occur or, world events occur, that we are very mindful to these situations. All right, most affected groups: parents, essential workers, young people, indigenous, and people of color. All right, the soul wound. So you're reading about that in your text and you're going to answer questions about that. But indigenous ideas about historical trauma involve the understanding that the trauma occurs in the soul or spirit. Many indigenous Americans over the generations were killed and moved to reservations. The results: poverty, racism, poor medical attention, a shorter lifespan, and loss of awareness of cultural heritage and spirituality over the centuries. The traumatic wound remains in the soul and appears in the body. The trauma continues. Indigenous Americans still experience continued racism and even denial of their existence by many governmental institutions. They have lower incomes and higher rates of alcoholism, abuse in families, suicide, and hopelessness. So it is our duty and our job to help people that are feeling this way be able to talk about the soul wound, be able to get these things out because maybe they have no one else to identify with. All right. Helping professionals and historical trauma. Professionals have often failed to see that the issues that clients bring to us are deeply involved with societal dysfunction, harassment, and oppression. Denial and lack of attention to historical trauma in the past are ever present. The multicultural movement showed that we need to become aware of external and historical causes of personal concerns. Psychological liberation from historical trauma occurs when clients discover that what they saw as a personal issue is not just their problem. So we're not seeing it as their problem, it is everyone's issue, right? If you really think about the depth of that statement, it is, if you think about their problem and then you think about who that affects, right? It bleeds into every aspect of other people's lives. Counselors can help clients begin to see that external and historical racism, sexism, heterosexism, or other forms of oppression are the underlying causes of many of their concerns. All right, so important concepts to consider: the microaggressions, advocacy, and racial battle fatigue. All right, awareness. Awareness of yourself, you as a cultural being, is vital. That is vital when you're looking at yourself as an authentic being and building authenticity within yourself and as a clinician. Be aware of your own assumptions, values, and biases because you're going to have them, and that is okay. You are your own and different cultural being. So just because you have biases and you have different values and you have different assumptions doesn't mean you cannot work with clients. You just have to be aware of them, and you have to be aware of when you can work with people and when you're like, this is not going to benefit them, nor will it benefit you. Have you experienced cultural trauma and microaggressions? It's very important to identify your own, hurt, your own experiences of whether it's racism or biases or whatever the case may be. How has that affected your sense of trust in others, both individuals and groups? Think about what is causing you to go into therapy. Are you going into therapy for X, for Y, for Z? What is it within you that you want to be a helping professional? And then refer to the respectful model. All right. Understand the worldview of the culturally different client. Worldview is the way you and your client understand the world. People from different backgrounds have vastly different philosophical views. Again, that is okay. It is okay to be different from our clients. We just have to respect their viewpoints, and obviously, you have to respect your own. So traditional approaches to counseling theory and skills may be inappropriate and or ineffective with some clients. So again, we can't lop everybody into just one category, right? Everybody is different. There's no cookie cutter approach. You may work this one technique with one client of one cultural background is not going to work the same with a different client of that same cultural background. So you just have to, you'll get to understand yourself and your technique and when to use things and when to refrain from them. All right, skills in action to cope with discrimination and build resilience. Helping clients recognize their strengths and resources provides a basis for solving their issues, but do not deny their concerns. Strengths will eventually be part of the solution. Assist clients in naming the issue and identifying contextual factors. Provide tools to address the situation. Apply advocacy skills and institutional intervention skills. Use guidelines offered by the Multicultural and Social Justice Counseling competencies. Use individual actions suggested by Su et al. Daryl Wing Su is the leading guru in multiculturalism. Probably when you take your multiculturalism class, the textbook will have been written by him. Anyways, to disarm and neutralize microaggressions. All right, trauma effects in the brain. Okay, now we're looking at neurobiology again. The thinking center is underactivated in the prefrontal cortex. Emotion regulation is underactivated in the anterior cingulate cortex. The fear center is overactivated in the amygdala. This is where we're looking at trauma and the brain. Consequences: difficulty in concentration and making decisions, also may lead to lack of control, emotional outbursts. The result of severe trauma, that is what could lead to a diagnosis of PTSD. One of the biggest things with PTSD is difficulty in concentrating. All right, CBT and trauma focused cognitive behavioral therapy, otherwise known as TFCBT, is a really good technique to use with people that suffer with PTSD. Micro counseling's listening skills are essential in CBT and virtually all methods. And some of those that fall under that umbrella are motivational interviewing and interpersonal therapy. And as you move further in your academia and you take therapeutic techniques or skills, whatever the class is called, it always changes whether you're getting your bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree. You will learn about all different kinds of techniques to use. CBT is a large umbrella with a lot of things that fall under it. All right, positive psychology aims to increase both resilience and optimism. Optimism, the definition of that is having hope, confidence, and cheerfulness, trust in oneself, personal power, and belief in the future. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from setbacks, temporary failure, and early or late trauma. Resiliency, again, many people have that within themselves, and it can also be learned. So it is important to help our clients build their resiliency. All right, in recent years, the field of counseling has developed an extensive body of research and knowledge supporting the importance of positive psychology. That is also a great class. So if you have the time in your schedule, I would sign up for positive psychology, probably one of the best classes I ever took. We need stories of strength and success. Find something the client is doing right and discover their resources and supports. Engagement is more important than happiness in terms of life satisfaction. I rarely use the word happy or happiness because that's an emotion. What we really want to develop and harness is contentness. All right, again, nice little chart to look at. Looks like a Rubik's Cube on advocacy. You can look at that on your own or pause. All right, so the TLCs for stress management: physical exercise, nutrition, weight and supplements, social relations, cognitive challenge, sleep, meditation and relaxation, multicultural pride and cultural identity. Those are things that you will look narrowly and then broadly. All right, TLC is for stress management. Additional important areas to consider: drugs and alcohol, medication and supplements, positive thinking, optimism and happiness, beliefs, values, and spirituality, nature breaks, no smoking, control screen time, art, music, dance, literature, relaxing and having fun, education, money and privilege, and social justice action. These are all things that you are going to learn in this course and throughout your career in counseling. All right, so we are at the end. I said I would keep it under under 30 minutes. We are at almost 24. So I'm going to try to keep it under 25. All right, so key points in practice: ethics and the counseling and psychotherapy process, multicultural humility and social justice competencies, the respectful model, the soul wound and historical trauma, privilege as a multicultural interviewing issue, microaggressions, awareness, knowledge, skills, and action for multicultural competence, bias and prejudice wound clients' souls and affect their brains, positive psychology, building client resilience, therapeutic lifestyle changes, specifics on which to build wellness for lifetime resilience, and ending with your portfolio of competencies and personal reflection. Whew, that was a long one. I mean, it was a short one, but it was a long-winded last slide. So hope you got to enjoy that, learned a little bit more about yourself and your potential, future client and clients. And again, hope you have a fantastic and wonderful week. And if you need anything, I am only an email or message away. All right. Peace.